Sabe sata bhavantu sukhitata awera sukhajiwino. Greetings, dear friends and fellow participants in the Female Religious Leaders and Dynamics of Female Agency in Religious Settings in South Asia workshop. I'm Ayyā Tathālokā, and I'm coming to you from the Aranya Bodhi Awakening Forest Hermitage on the Sonoma coast of Northern California. So I'm going to be speaking today, presenting on my research on the question of do Bhikkhunīs, that is fully ordained women renunciates in Theravāda Buddhism, contain the potency of ordination transmission, and if so, whence the source? So a brief intro to the beginnings of this research. When I went forth into monastic life more than 30 years ago, this is in the late 80s, and the first American citizen in Theravāda Buddhism to undertake the full Bhikkhuni ordination was Ayyā, and she was a great exemplar. She was teaching and leading retreats widely here in the United States, and she was one of 12 women renunciates from various countries in Theravāda Buddhism to go ahead in the first full Bhikkhuni ordination international that was held here in California, in Southern California, and it created quite a stir, a lot of rise of energy, and then not everyone agreed with it. The question came up, if not like this, then how? But she was brave. She went ahead in the footsteps of the conqueror, as they say about the Buddha. So at that time also the first Shakyadita International Association of Buddhist Women's Conference was held in 1987 in Bodh Gaya. There's Ayyā there, Venerable Karma Lekshe Somo, also Samdet Pramahagosananda, who is the international patriarch of Cambodian Buddhism. At that time also my late most venerable preceptor, Venerable Dr. Ratanasara Banteji, went ahead with several other leading Sri Lankan Bhikkhu Acharyas in offering seminary Pabaja, novice ordination, which had not been being offered for women in Theravada Buddhism for a long time, and then he was one of the supporters of this first full ordination of Theravada Bhikkhunīs, especially of the first cohort of Sri Lankan Bhikkhunīs to undertake the ordination. Here there are 11 of them. 5 went on to receive the full Upasampadā ordination in 1988, which was the year of my going forth into monastic life. So I went to Europe and then to India as an white-robed anagarika, but the Indian people called me a brahmacharini. In India, I had hoped to meet Dipama, who was a famous woman meditation teacher, but she had passed away just before I got to her neighborhood in Kolkata. There were lots of other kinds of women renunciates, including Westerners in India, various kinds of sannyasinis, sadhvis, pravrajikas, brahmacharinis, avadutikas, brahmakumaris, but no Buddhist bhikkhunīs. At least I wasn't able to meet any. I heard about some who had visited India or studying in the Himalayas somewhere, the rumored mythological being. In India, the revival of Bhikkhuni ordination for Indian women did not happen until a decade later, 1998, in Bodh Gaya. So, as a young high school student, I read some Buddhist books, which gave me the idea that there was at one time a thriving Bhikkhunī Sangha with fully awakened Bhikkhuni teachers, large numbers of them, hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of them. Bhikkhuni leaders, great exemplars in the Theravāda, translated as the Psalms of the Sisters, and also in the kindred sayings, the Samyutta Nikaya, connected discourses of the Buddha, which has a whole book within it, the Bhikkhuni Samyutta. So my male peers at that time, going into or having entered into Buddhist monastic life in South and Southeast Asia, were very much welcomed with great dignity. They were valorized, and they received full institutional support for their going forth and ordaining. And I found out that that was not so any longer for those of the female sex or gender, and started to learn more about why that was, what was going on, and if anything could be done about it. So fast forward now 30 plus years, and I've been a Bhikkhuni Preceptor, Pawatini, Upaja, for more than a decade. It's my 23rd Vasa since full Bhikkhuni ordination. I've been in monastic life for 32 years. I'd like to acknowledge I have an abundance of insider information and personal care and concerns about my topics, my topic of research here, in which I am living immersed. So you might think after a decade as a Bhikkhuni preceptor, and with the, there is now an increasing number of Theravāda Bhikkhunis and Theravāda Bhikkhuni preceptors internationally, that we would by now have it all figured out 30 years later. But I am still learning, and happy to be so, and with you here now learning together. So an intro to the basic framing of my subject. Beneath the surface of the issues raised in public debates regarding acceptance of the revival and reestablishment of Bhikkhuni ordination in Theravāda and Tibetan Buddhism, a more fundamental debate as to the gendered potency and agency lives unresolved, mostly underground and rarely discussed directly. This debate is in part rooted in the early Buddhist canons, as well as being located in, informed by, and in negotiation with evolving traditional gender cultures of the Buddhists of South and Southeast Asian traditions. The deep undercurrent of uncertainty centers on questions as to the gendered agency, potency, and efficacy of a bhikkhuni and the Bhikkhunī Sangha with regards to effective transmission of Bhikkhunī Upasampadā, full ordination or full acceptance into the Sangha. Likewise, the agency of a bhikkhu and the Bhikkhu Sangha with regards to Bhikkhuni ordination. The questions, the doubts and concerns are not only one-sided. So in whom does the generative and establishing agency or essential potency lie, and why? Is it gendered at all? Where does it come from? How is it established? We'll explore these questions and the positions taken, together with the thesis that this potency is fundamentally non-gendered and gender-inclusive. So let's dive into that. So according to canonical texts of early Buddhist traditions, in example, the Agganya Sutta, Knowledge of Beginnings, the 27th discourse of the long discourses of the Buddha, the Tika Nikaya, the primordial state of humanity is non-gendered beings made of light. These beings came to earth back when the crust was still liquid and consumed the earth. And over time, doing so, they developed sexual characteristics, and with that, also customs related to sex, acquisitions, attachments, disagreements, and violence. Most early Buddhist traditions valorize, exemplify, and advocate for a reversal of this process, up to and including giving up violence, acquisitions, marks of gender, sex, and attachments, both physical and emotional, as the path leading to full awakening, Sambodhi. The state of complete awakening, abhisampoti, is non-gendered, and the fully awakened ones, arahanta, no longer have tendencies to acquisition, violence, or sexual behavior in the early Buddhist teachings. This is given the highest value. Oh, mata puto pita pahata, ayaka chapure ahum. Previously, I was mother, son, father, brother, grandmother. These are the words of Mahapajapati Gautami Therī in her Therī verses 5 through 7, and the verses of the women elders or Psalms of the Sisters, as you saw earlier. And she is speaking from the standpoint of her awakened vision as to her many past lives in relationship to the person who has now become the Buddha. And obviously here she's not speaking only about female incarnations, but mother, son, father, brother, grandmother. Per most, but not all, canonical early Buddhist texts and commentaries, humans are not considered to have a fixed gender. That is, they are not gender stable, but are rather gender fluid, in a way, capable of both change of biological sex and gender identity, not only from life to life, but even within one lifetime, whether unintentionally, due to forces of karmic conditioning, or intentionally. Gender is not considered a factor of true identity, and relinquishment and freedom from all kinds of craving, seeking, clinging and attachment, stress and suffering over gendered identities is taught as an essential element of the path of liberation. Oh, one to whom it might occur, I'm a woman, or I'm a man, or I'm anything at all, is fit for Mara to address. The awakened words of Soma Therī from the Bhikkhunī Samyutta, the connected discourses of the Buddha. She says, after being challenged by Mara about what can she attain in the spiritual life with the two-fingered wisdom of a woman, she replies in this way. What does womanhood matter at all when the mind is concentrated well, when knowledge flows on steadily as one sees correctly into the Dhamma? This seems clear, and yet we struggle with all these things. It's not all as clear as this. I want to acknowledge the tremendous challenges that there are. Well, I'd like to invoke the blessings of our matron saint of Bhikkhuni Vinaya as we're about to delve further into these ancient texts. That's Patachara Therī, who's praised by the Buddha as his Bhikkhuni disciple most outstanding and excellent in Vinaya, monastic discipline. She's remembered in the Therigatha by her students, 530 her awakened Bhikkhuni disciples in several verses. So originally in Buddhism, there's the Buddha and the male monastic community, the Bhikkhu Sangha, per the early Buddhist textual traditions. Then after 5 years, per the Pali text, the women's monastic community, the Bhikkhunī Sangha, is also founded, per the Buddha's original determination to have a fourfold community, Chatu Parisa. Both the first bhikkhus and the first bhikkhunis, whether 1 or 500 of the bhikkhunis, depending on the tradition, are ordained by the Buddha himself, with subsequent allowances to the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis and their respective sanghas to also grant ordinations through progressively detailed and refined stages and procedures. Early Buddhist texts agree, even if some details differ, and it's widely known that the Buddha established dual ordination, Upasampadā, full acceptance for bhikkhunis by both bhikkhu and Bhikkhuni Sanghas. I should have said it the other way. The bhikkhunis come first in this. These texts also record the Buddha allowing and enjoining bhikkhus alone to fully ordain bhikkhunis. and give instruction and teaching to bhikkhunis, as well as to grant women lesser forms of novice, seminary, and probationary sikkamana ordination when called upon. With regards ordination, it may be contextually inferred, but is not explicitly stated, that this means when there were no qualified bhikkhunis available to do so. Thus, these canonical ordination allowances and injunctions, and when they may be used or not, are not contemporarily well known, well understood, and widely agreed upon. There is further agreement, however, that the Buddha canonically granted qualified bhikkhunis to themselves give aspiring women novice and probationary forms of going forth into monastic life and training, as well as to prepare women for full Bhikkhuni ordination. Local chapters of the Bhikkhunī Sangha were granted the right and responsibility to agree upon candidates for both preparatory training and full Bhikkhuni ordination, as well as to nominate and agree upon appointments of their own bhikkhuni preceptors, pāvātini, upajjhāya, and knowledgeable instructors and officiants, accharini. This is also well known and seems empowering with regards to women's religious agency in their own monastic communities, but it has actually acted as one of the biggest stumbling blocks to the continuation and the revival of the Bhikkhuni or Bhikkhunī Sanghas. Let's look at the chronicles now. Records of the Ashokan missions in the 3rd century BCE and later missions up to the 5th century CE record that bhikkhus and also bhikkhunis were called upon to travel internationally to give teachings and ordinations to aspiring men and women. Now, inscriptions. As with the chronicles, inscriptions from the Indian subcontinent likewise depict 3 patterns of discipleship, teaching, and ordination lineages for women as Buddhism spread over time. The first, bhikkhu teacher, transmits to bhikkhuni, or female monastic disciples. Second, a bhikkhuni teacher transmits to female monastic disciples. Third, a bhikkhu teacher to a bhikkhuni teacher then transmits to her own female monastic disciples. We see these 3 patterns reflected in the inscriptions. Kanagana Hali Mahastupa Mahachaitya has inscriptions from the 1st century BCE to the 3rd century CE, depicting 2 of these types of monastic discipleship. And it has a very interesting, long, detailed, informative inscription. Let's take it as an example. Did bhikkhunis have bhikkhu upajjhayas or preceptors? This is from the inscription related to the donation of slabs paving the ritual circumambulation path, Pradakshina Pata, around the Antalaka Chaitya Dhammarajaka from 120 CE. The pious gift of Bhikkhuni Dhammasiri, together with her parents and with her preceptor, Upajjhaya, Venerable Bhadanta Varanabhuti, and Bhadanta Siha, dedicated for the well-being and happiness of all beings. Thus we see possibly in some areas of India earlier, as well as what's well known to have happened later in East Asian Buddhist traditions, bhikkhu preceptors and the Bhikkhu Sangha continue to give one-sided ordination to women even after the establishment of the Bhikkhunī Sangha, in a few places even to this day. The appropriateness of this action has been discussed and debated since at least the 5th century, and this discussion continues up to the present. Now, in East Asia and China and Korea, Bhikkhunī Sanghas are also known to have given one-sided Bhikkhuni ordination to women for periods of time without participation of Bhikkhu Sanghas due to imperial edicts and political restrictions. Although early Buddhist texts such as the Pali Therigatha and Mulasarvastivada Vinaya regularly relate Bhikkhuni teachers granting ordination to women without any mention of bhikkhus, this one-sided method on the Bhikkhuni's side alone is not canonically affirmed as fulfilling the full criteria for Bhikkhuni ordination, not in the texts as we have them now. A question is appropriate to raise here as to why. We can ask, is there legal canonical flexibility to adapt to meet contemporary needs and sensibilities in re-establishing Bhikkhuni ordinations as there appears to have been in past? It may be appropriate to mention here that in both contemporary Taiwanese Dharmaguptaka and Sri Lankan Theravāda traditions Bhikkhuni ordinations, senior bhikkhu teachers regularly act as upajayas, preceptors for dual Bhikkhuni ordinations. That's contemporarily. This is not required or attested to canonically, as there are no bhikkhu upajayas present in the canonical proceedings for Bhikkhuni ordination in either Vinaya tradition above, nor in the Mulasarvastivada Vinaya texts of the Tibetan Himalayan traditions. Rather, there are Bhikkhuni upajayas. Thus, it could be asked, why is this done? I've asked this question. In the Theravāda Bhikkhuni ordinations conducted by leading monastics of Sri Lankan traditions, there have been feelings expressed of offering and establishing needed confidence and support, as there is concern if the ordination might not be perceived as strong enough or having the requisite backing and authority needing to be established. This comes from my personal interviews. So I'll share with you some photos of newly ordained Theravāda Bhikkhunīs in Sri Lanka and Bodh Gaya, and then some pictures of Bhikkhu Upajayas here, and here in Bodh Gaya and in Sri Lanka. This has been reversed here. Sri Lanka is on the right and Bodh Gaya is on the left. And some ordination certificates that show bhikkhus in the position of being the Upajaya here from Sri Lanka for bhikkhunis and also for seminaries. And then here, this is from the Taiwanese, Chinese Foguangshan tradition. This brings up various questions that are being asked as to Bhikkhuni ordination lineages and transmission, as we try to understand its true nature and characteristics. Is there only one lineage, the Buddha lineage, that's held equally by both bhikkhus and bhikkhunis? Or are there separate bhikkhu and bhikkhuni lineages? Or is there only one bhikkhu lineage that's held by both bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, with bhikkhunis literally meaning female bhikkhus, that's only fully transmitted at the level of the full ordination, Upasampada, by the Bhikkhu Sangha, who are the holders and transmitters of the bhikkhuni lineages, rightly. In the Pali text, the woman who is fully accepted, ordained by either a Bhikkhu Sangha or a Bhikkhunī Sangha alone is known as Ekato Upasampanna, one ordained on one side. This state's normally short, less than 1 day, a transitional period between the time a female candidate receives Uttapana Upasampada from the Bhikkhunī Sangha, and soon after when she receives Upasampada from the Bhikkhu Sangha. The essential sameness of a bhikkhu and bhikkhuni is known in the Pali text Vinaya through canonical provisions for the sex change of a bhikkhu or bhikkhuni to the opposite sex. If such sex change occurs, they are still ordained and automatically become members of the other sex community, with whom they should now dwell and whose precepts they now automatically become beholden to. So, for consideration, the essential sameness of bhikkhu and bhikkhuni ordinations. However, per 10th to 13th century Pali text sub-commentaries, the only case this is not true is for the one who is ekato upasampanna, ordained on one side as above. Having been fully accepted and ordained by the Bhikkhunī Sangha, but not yet by the Bhikkhu Sangha, the Bhikkhu Sangha's formal acceptance is still required before she, now he, is considered fully ordained as a bhikkhu. The reverse is not true. That is, a bhikkhu upon changing sex automatically is a member of the Bhikkhunī Sangha with no further acceptance from the Bhikkhunī Sangha needed. The question of why this is so is relevant to our inquiry. In the Tibetan Mulasarastivada text, the complete and easy transferability of monastic state is also true likewise for male and female novices, assumedly whether they have been given the going forth by either a bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni. That's a question for follow-up inquiry. Both Chinese and Tibetan Buddhist traditions contain concepts translated into English as essence of the precepts, the essence of the patimokkha, pratimoksha vows. Both are considered genderless. I've asked, is there something similar in the polytext traditions? In these traditions, volition, cetana, is considered the essential factor in all karmas, actions of body, speech, and mind. In the polytext Mahavibhanga and the Bhikkhuni Vibhanga, in the explication and analysis of the first precept of the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, both the bhikkhu and bhikkhuni are defined virtually identically, with the only difference being that the latter is defined as fully ordained by the dual Sangha. Both speak of auspicious bhadra bhikkhus and bhadra bhikkhunis, and the heartwood sara bhikkhus and sara bhikkhunis, bearers of the essence. I'll comment, in contemporary South and Southeast Asian Buddhist culture, male monks are normally thought of as auspicious and essential, but unordained female monastics are not equally so, or not at all. This is changing with bhikkhunis, with the revival. So, the heartwood, sara, here in the Buddha's greater discourse on the heartwood, Maha Saropama Sutta in Majjhima Nikaya 29, the Buddha speaks of the sara as the unshakable freedom of heart, akuppa ceto vimutti, etang sarang. This Dhamma teaching indicates that what is the essence, the heartwood, is not to be found in material things, including the sex of bodies, or even in materialistic ways of viewing the precepts or vows, or meditative performance, or all one's rote learning, but is rather found only in that unshakable liberation of mind and heart that's utterly non-gender qualified or dependent. So we see the essence of the precepts and the essence of the holy life are both equally non-gendered and accessible to everyone in the early Buddhist teachings as transmitted in the polytext tradition. Saravanta bhikkhunis, like great trees bearing heartwood. Here we find these words explicitly applied to bhikkhunis, leaders and teachers by the Buddha. Like a great tree standing, bearing heartwood. The Buddha is speaking with regards to his foster mother, Maha Gautami, the Gautami Therī, Apadana, verse 278. He says, there are these fools who doubt that women too can grasp the truth. Gautami, show your spiritual power that they might give up their false views. The leading Theris are regularly compared favorably by the Buddha to then contemporary symbols of royal and natural power and awe. Great trees bearing heartwood, she-elephants that have burst their bonds and now roam freely, and lionesses, with the Buddha asking them to roar their lion's roar by demonstrating their abilities and powers accrued in the fulfillment of their path. Another who he asked to roar her lion's roar is his spiritual daughter, past life daughter, and one of the two chief leaders of the Bhikkhunī Sangha, Upalawana Therī. He says to her, demonstrate your spiritual power to those leading my sasana. Cut off whatever doubts remain to the fourfold communities now. She was praised and commended by the Buddha as foremost in spiritual power among all of the Bhikkhunīs. We'll take a field trip to Ajanta now, to a cave I call cave of important women in the Buddha's life. Here up top, the Buddha has gone to the Tawatingsa heaven to teach his late mother, Mahamaya. She's here, and upon descending, Upalawana works her miracle. Here she is here, we think, as she's changed gender to get in first to greet the Buddha, and she's manifested as a Chakravartin or Chakravarti Raja. And the Buddha is coming down here, and we see not one but actually two people, unidentified, bowing at the feet of the Buddha. And there are two monastics here who look like they might be bhikkhus, one elder and one younger, with a somewhat precocious look on their face. And then a group of female monastics with both shoulders covered, who scholars have thought might be Bhikkhunīs. So what's going on here? You can take a field trip to Khandara also. And here we see the Buddha descending once again. Mother Earth is rising up to greet him, and two monastics also with shoulder covers, which might be an identifier of Bhikkhunīs here. And there's a question, as in many of these popular images, who is that there? Is this Upalawana and her miracle, or is this someone else? So I'd like to talk now about a case study that I did, the evolving 1,000-year story of Agra Sawika Upalawana, on the location and dislocation of female spiritual power, potency, and agency. First, in the Theravāda, we see her power and potency self-located. Her spiritual power is her own. Her designation indicates her spiritual potency. Second, we see her displaced and replaced. In the Theravāda Abhidhamma commentarial traditions, Sariputta comes into the position of greeting the Buddha first, and Upalawana's miracle is moved elsewhere to a different date and location. We also see the hero of the Pragya Paramita traditions appearing, and Upalawana is partially acknowledged but effectively supplanted. The traditions then that acknowledge Upalawana's presence but place their hero Shubhuti before Upalawana in seeing and greeting the Buddha. They don't deny her miracle, but they just say he had better insight, so he was able to get in front. She's effectively supplanted. Finally, we see Upalawana both raped and killed. I think probably post-mortem. There's a question about precepts here. In a text, if you rape and kill someone, is it an offense to the monastic discipline? So, especially if they're an arahant. Finally, Upalawana is questionably, posthumously, recorded as both raped by an amorous suitor in the polytext explication of the first Patimokkha precept, and then killed by the archenemy of the Sangha Theravāda in the polytext commentary. I'll just note, in other textual traditions, it's not her. Other bhikkhunis who are very close to the Buddha, like his half-sister Nanda, are the ones who get raped here. Or in another tradition, the Mula Sarvastivada tradition, then it's Mahakasapa's former wife, Pada Kapilani, who's the one who gets raped here. And The one who's killed by Devadatta is various as well. So we see an interesting pattern here of the traditions posthumously, I suspect, killing off, raping and killing off their leading arahant women. And a special lesson here in the polytext tradition that even if you're foremost in spiritual power, still deluded men can rape you and kill you. You better be careful. A powerful lesson, I suspect, from later commentators. So, in the gendered real world of desirous and polluting bodies and monastic ordination, over time, these matters have become pervasively murky, convoluted, and unclear. And these patterns are repeated over and over again, such that doubts exist even as to female bodies and minds' suitability for liberation, not to mention women's receiving and bestowing full ordination in traditional Buddhist communities of Theravāda and Himalayan Nalanda traditions. So things look like they start deteriorating, I would say. My historical studies after the 2nd century, I'm not sure about the 3rd, but by the 4th up to the 5th, and we get here to the 6th, we start seeing a lot, even entering into the 5th century, of things like this. Men predominate in Dhamma. This is the Jain exegete Sanghadasa. A man is mentally self-reliant and strong, a woman weak and fragile and subject to others. This is the ethos on the Indic subcontinent, Dharma Shastras, the Jains, and also the state of the Buddhist Sangha goes there. Liberation is not for women due to their inferiority to men. This is another Digambara Jain commentator on Sri Dhamma, the state of the Sangha in evolving relationships with evolving cultures. So, 1,000 years after the Buddha, perhaps, or longer, from about 1,000 years ago, with the complete disappearance of the Theravāda tradition's Bhikkhunī Sangha of South and Southeast Asia, often said to have been lost for 1,000 years, and of the Bhikkhunī Sanghas of the Nalanda and Himalayan traditions, best known now through Tibetan Buddhism, the question has arisen once again in our generation, as long ago, as to how women can be ordained in the absence of a bhikkhuni or bhikkhuni sangha of one's own traditions, and who has the power, the religious agency, and potency to legitimately do so. We note here in the Manu Dharma Smriti, laws of Manu, no rite is performed for women or by women with the recitation of ritual formulas. That is well-established law. Just wonder if this idea isn't part of what we're dealing with here. So with the prevalence of negative, disempowering, and debilitating ideas about the non-capabilities or capabilities and religious non-agency of womanhood held by large numbers of Buddhists in these cultures, and people's predominant lived experience in these cultures being with unempowered and largely unvalidated women's unordained forms of Buddhist monasticism, it's hard to see through the tangle of all of these views, many more like this. It is like getting caught up with the branches, bark, and sapwood in the aforementioned Buddha's Mahasaropama Sutta discourse on the heartwood. And yet, the Buddha's teaching is made for untangling this tangle. So let's return to our principal questions. Do bhikkhunis contain the potency of ordination transmission? If so, whence the source? In whom does the generative and establishing agency or essential potency lie, and why? Is it gendered at all? Where does it come from? How is it established? On review of our sources, two levels or types of agency appear to me. The one, essential, non-gendered, inclusive, dependent only on vision and volition, fully capable of accessing and experiencing the transcendent and unconditioned, lokuttara. Another, highly conditional, generated embedded within social constructs and conditions, co-arising in conjunction with worldly conditions, lokya dhammas. I recognize this is not a new argument. In the first, the potency and potentiality lies inherently in human birth and within the Dhamma, and becomes manifest when realized. The second exists in active interface with highly changeable, co-created social constructs, concepts, and agreements, and is manifest in Dhamma cultures and Vinaya rules. The importance lies in understanding the active relationship between these two, and awareness of the question, is that relationship enabling or disabling? Here's where we come to what I have termed the Buddhist prime directive. Here's a go at what that would be or is. To offer the very best inspiration, encouragement, and expedient means, the most comprehensive support possible for encountering and fully developing the path of awakening, and all means of support possible for moralizing, valorizing, and expediting the sharing of that path by those with genuine knowledge and experience of it. Notice I don't say anything about gender here. So I would propose Buddhists using this Buddhist prime directive as a touchstone to investigate and review all kinds of views, criteria, and qualifications in which choiceful action is possible, to see where and how greater skillful means can be engaged. If any actions are being taken, or systems established, or customs perpetuated that go counter the prime directive, may we recognize these actions have gone awry and quickly reorient and correct course. So my catchphrase, not a catchphrase, my freedom phrase, my motto now is from Renaissance, is revival to Renaissance. From revival to Renaissance. I developed this motto with the 2,600 year anniversary of the now revived Bhikkhunī Sangha, and we are seeing, we hope to see further greater revival. I turn my thoughts to Renaissance, and what would that mean? And to me, that means something very much like, once again, our world not having a deficit of fully awakened women teachers and leaders, and in the Buddhist traditions of the Theravāda and the Himalayas, great, most excellent Bhikkhuni teachers, leaders, practitioners, sages, and saints. Once again, fulfilling their own paths, and then also sharing this brilliance and excellence with our world for all of our long-term benefit and happiness. Amhakang tikaratang hitaya sukaya. So may the power of all awakened women of the way always be a blessing to us, awakening within us our own dormant or latent or rising spiritual potential and capabilities, that we may know and experience for ourselves the fulfillment and highest rewards of fully living the holy life. Sāvika bodhasetasa sada soting karotu. Sāvika bodhasetasa sada soting karotu. Sāvika bodhasetasa sada soting karotu. this ends my presentation, and I will leave you with a few photos of the life. This is here at our hermitage. And just after Bhikkhuni Patimokkha recitation. First, Khmer, Cambodian Bhikkhuni with international Bhikkhuni preceptors visiting Cambodia this last year. International Bhikkhuni Ordination in Bodh Gaya. Katina, celebration of the robe of merit with Bhikkhunī Sangha at Dhammadharini here in California. Our hermitage with venerable Bhikkhu brothers here at the creek here at our hermitage. And venerating, revering elder Bhikkhu teachers here at our hermitage. And our women's monastic community. Those who are fully ordained, also novices, and those in white, as I was once long ago, aspiring to enter into and fully ordain in this tradition, no longer with such a glass ceiling as so many women's heads were hitting previously and still are in places. May that glass ceiling be lifted with regards our full potentialities. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.